What you're looking at right now is huge. Thousands of music fans getting ready to crowd into Fulton County this weekend with that very scene. No, we're not talking about Music Midtown. That's already happened this past weekend. We're talking this coming weekend, a big event. This time we're talking about Tomorrow World 2013. The three-day event is being held for the very first time outside of Europe, and it's going to be right in our own backyard near Chattahoochee Hills. That's near Peachtree City, south of Atlanta. It kicks off this Friday, and organizers expect it to be big. This right now is an overhead look from this afternoon as organizers put the finishing touches on the festival grounds, everything from the stages there to the campgrounds where people will be camping out, enjoying themselves. Joining me now is Tomorrow World Project Manager Sean Kent. Good to have you, and boy, this is exciting. You've been in town since the beginning of September putting all the pieces together. So I understand it's going to be some 500 acres, 300 acts, 180,000 people you expect. What can we expect here in Metro Atlanta? Explain how this is all going to take place.
Well, Tomorrow World is really probably it's going to be the biggest festival in America. We're bringing over for the first time a European festival. So there's a lot of tents, there's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of decoration that actually has never been seen in American festivals.
All electronic, all rock and roll. What type of music?
Well, the music is primarily electronic music,
yeah.
So it's going to be just DJs playing all the time. But electronic music is very broad, so we've got a wide range from the real techno beats all the way down to really cool progressive house.
You're expecting 180,000 people. Why expand it out of Europe? You've been in Europe now for what, 10 years? Why expand it out of Europe? Why Georgia?
Well, we have had so much interest in Tomorrowland in Europe for the last 10 years. We have 2 million people subscribing for tickets every year. We had to bring it somewhere in the world. America was our biggest choice, and Georgia here in South Fulton County, we found the most beautiful location, the most beautiful nature, the perfect place for Tomorrow World.
Wow, okay. And so what's being done in terms of security for all these people you're expecting?
We have a great amount of security set up there. We've got an incredible safety plan. We've been doing this for 10 years, so we're very well experienced in how to keep the place safe, how to keep you safe in terms of weather conditions, and keep our public safe.
Yeah, all right. So it's rain or shine. It's a rain or shine event.
It's a rain or shine event.
That could be a lot of mud. That's what we had this past weekend for Music Midtown. But no wishing you, not wishing you any ill, though. Hopefully you'll have some great weather. This is the first festival that has set a minimum age of 21. Tell me why you do that and how you enforce that.
Yeah. It was a very important decision. In fact, we're the only festival in America that is a 21+ event. So we want to attract responsible, mature people for this music, for this festival. And because we're such a high-quality festival, we really want to allow people to understand that electronic dance music isn't just for teenagers. It's really for every age.
All right, but minimum age 21. You got to prove that. All right, can people still buy tickets?
They sure can. Yeah,
Where?
we got day tickets available online at tomorrowworld.com.
All right, tomorrowworld.com. Sean Kent, project manager. Good luck.
Great, thank you.
Thanks
Hope
so
to see
much.
you there.
Well, we'll see about that. I'm not sure I would fit in very well, but I am over 21.
You can make it.
Okay, I can promise you that. All right, don't forget, we posted a link with all of the performers on our website. A lot of performers. I said 300 acts. You can go to 11alive.com for more information. Sean, again, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Randy Waters at Turner Field, where the Braves open a 7-game homestand tonight that will close the regular season. First, the Brewers in town, then the Phillies. The important thing is they want to win enough games so they will get home field advantage in the upcoming National League Division Series. Ideally, that would start a week from Thursday with the wild card survivor coming here to play the Braves. Although some things are going to be different this week as far as regulars and if they get some rest. In fact, Freddie Gonzalez said he might rest 2 or 3 at one time, but certainly not 4 or 5 because, as I said, they still need to win some games. Batting practice was optional today. Players didn't need to report until 5 p.m. And in fact, the goggles were still hanging in Craig Kimbrell's locker from the celebration in Chicago last night to protect his eyes from the bubbly stuff. Freddie Gonzalez says you savor this division title.
There's no guarantees that what Bobby and John Sherhulst did here for the Braves 14 in a row, you may not never happen again. Last year Washington won the division and they're not in it. We were in.
One regular who will not be here tonight, catcher Brian McCann. He and his wife Ashley welcomed a new member of the family, baby girl Colby, into the family late this afternoon. So his absence, understandable. Brenda.
It is indeed. Congratulations to them. In celebration of our hometown team clinching the NL East, well, we've put together a list of the 11 most awesome things about the Atlanta Braves. So what do you think about this? Could you add to the list? Just go to 11alive.com. Right there on the homepage, you can see the list. And of course, we want to know what tops your list of what makes the Braves so awesome. Find us on Facebook. Let us know what you think deserves to make the list.
Oh, yes. Hopefully the weather continues to stay lovely for Tomorrow World this coming up weekend. Brenda, I know you're going to be going out there, right?
I just might. You never know. Yes, it looks fantastic for the weekend. Thanks, Mike. All right, number 3, several LinkedIn users have now filed a class action lawsuit against the social network. According to the New York Times, the suit accuses the company of breaking into their accounts, harvesting emails, and sending out spam. They say in an effort to get new users, LinkedIn sent emails to existing members' contacts and used their names without consent. LinkedIn has denied all accusations. Number 6, a federal judge in Brooklyn, New York, has ordered the FDA to make the morning after pill available over the counter. The order also directs the FDA to make it available to a person of any age without prescription. Joining me now are Stacey Fox with Planned Parenthood and Jay Watts with Life Training Institute to talk more about what is no doubt a very controversial decision by this judge. So, Stacey, let's start with you. What does this ruling mean to you?
Deborah, you know, this ruling is a long overdue step forward for women's health. You know, this ruling makes good sense, and it's good science for women of all ages.
All right, Jay, I have to bring you in on this. I'm sure you are taking the opposite point of view.
Yeah, I'm not in principle against contraception, but when the judge says that Secretary Sebelius' position was unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious, and all it said was that women categorized at this point as 17-year-old adults and over have access to this drug, and that women 14, 15, and 16-year-old girls need a prescription to get it. I don't see that as unreasonable or capricious or arbitrary. It seems to be the kind of thing that we as a society are used to, setting limits on our young people so that adults have to be involved and to know what's going on in their lives.
Do you think this promotes sexual promiscuity among young kids?
The research on whether or not EC promotes sexual promiscuity is kind of off and on. It used to be, it used to absolutely no, that you saw no increase. There's some research lately that says you may see some increase. I see that as less the issue than it is the idea of the government saying that families, whatever their cultural background, religious background, or ethical background, should be left out of the medical decisions of their children at the ages of 14, 15, and 16 years old.
Yeah, all right, Stacey, chime in. You know,
well,
how do you counter that?
The issue here is that the FDA's rules are about science, not about morality. And so this is about a drug and its efficacy and its need for women of all ages. And so when contraception fails or there's unprotected sex that happens, women need fast access to emergency contraception and don't need to have hold up at the pharmacy counter.
It seems to me that we are at the intersection of pregnancy prevention and sexual promiscuity. That's sort of how I might characterize it. Would you characterize it the same way? And where does this road lead us?
Well, I think what's interesting is when you say that science dictates policy, the position that 14 and 15 and 16-year-old people ought to have access to it isn't a scientific determination. That's a worldview determination. And so when we have this intersection,
that's a moral
that is in
point
itself
of view.
A moral point of view.
Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I don't disagree, but the FDA doesn't make moral decisions. The FDA makes decisions based on science.
But for the judge to say that they ought to have access to it is for the judge to introduce his own moral point of view into this discussion. But to do it by saying that this is science versus morality is an unfair characterization, and it puts one side looking like they are against science. I'm not against science. I love science. I just think 14 and 15, 16-year-old children have to have their parents involved in their life, or a doctor or some medical professional.
But the research that the FDA did in 2011 said that all women of all ages should have access to emergency contraception. And I think the arbitrary piece is, what's the difference between a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old? That feels a little bit arbitrary.
Do you think we were on a slippery slope, though? When we start sort of trying to define what's an adult and what's not an adult, are we on a slippery slope? Where are we headed?
The point of emergency contraception is to reduce unintended pregnancy. Over half of pregnancies in the United States are unintended. So if we open up access to emergency contraception, we're going to have impact on those rates.
There is no scientific evidence to support that. Dr. James Trussell, who is one of the world's leading researchers in contraception, says that this particular brand of contraception, of emergency contraception, may do more or probably does more than nothing. It doesn't affect it, and this particular brand of contraception doesn't appear to affect it. And so to say that we ought to give it to children of that age when there's no evidence to support the fact that it actually does stop unintended pregnancies seems to be a far reach into the lives of people and their ability to manage what's going on in the lives of their children.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Wish we had more time, but thank you very much again, Jay Watts and Stacey Fox. I appreciate you both. All right, number 5, the revolving restaurant atop downtown's Weston Peachtree Plaza is getting a $1 million makeover. The Sundial Restaurant Bar and View will close April 28th for renovations. It's expected to reopen in August with the new decor and a brand new menu. Sundial opened with the Weston Hotel back in 1976. Located 723 feet in the air, its panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline have made it a top destination for diners over the years. Number 4, even on vacation in Hawaii, an officer is always on duty. Check this out. This is the airport in Honolulu where in just a few seconds you're going to see a TSA agent getting attacked. The surveillance video shows a woman trying to push her way through the flight crew security section. As the agent there struggles to try to control this woman, in steps Justin Rogers. He is a police corporal vacationing in Hawaii from California.
Police officer or not, the woman was being assaulted. She was defenseless, had her arms up, trying to defend herself, and somebody really needed to help her, and luckily I was close enough to be able to help her out.
Number 5, a concussion is the rare sports injury that affects the brain. That is the only irreplaceable part of the body. We've seen so much focus on concussions in football lately, not just among the pros, but among kids as well, those young athletes. For all of you parents out there worried about your young athlete, well, we want to give you an in-depth look now at the dangers of concussions and what's being done to help prevent them. Here's Matt Pearl.
You got your one. Kind of you blacked out and you got smelling salts after the game.
Chris Davis loves football.
Come on, hey.
And he's had a concussion.
You really just told somebody you blacked out and they said, well, I think you had a concussion the other night.
That was more than 20 years ago. Today, concussions are a big controversy in professional and youth football.
Reps, let's go,
The head coach at Cedar Shoals High is one of many taking aim at the problem.
The Heads Up program's just made us all a little bit more aware.
Widen that base.
Davis signed his school up for Heads Up Football. The program, run by USA Football, teaches players to tackle with their heads up.
When it comes your time to make a play, you're going to do what you've been taught. And that's what this program does.
But Davis freely admits it only solves part of the problem.
You got kids who are banging heads every play. Both concussions that we've had this year on our football team weren't due to tackling. They happened at the point of attack at the line of scrimmage.
Brantley Summers loves football.
And at the start of the play, I remember everything that happened.
And he's had a concussion.
Then I kind of blank out for a little bit.
His came at the line of scrimmage 2 weeks ago. At this practice, he was held out of contact. The state of Georgia is getting tougher on concussions. This past spring, the legislature passed a bill that said if a youth athlete sustains a concussion, that athlete must receive clearance from a health care provider before returning to play.
We are at least understanding that we need to protect the brain, and the culture of football is changing.
The bill and the Heads Up program emphasize awareness, teaching students and parents about the signs and symptoms. But for young athletes still learning about their bodies, this also is not foolproof.
Kids tend to not report symptoms because they don't want to come out of the game or because they don't understand what a concussion is and they don't really know what they're feeling.
Inside. Good.
Chris Slade loves football. Has he had a concussion?
Not that I know of, no. I mean, I'm sure I did, but you just get out there and play.
Slade spent 9 years in the NFL, mainly as a linebacker for the Patriots.
Mick.
Now he coaches the Pace Academy, and he's getting proactive.
One is it protects you.
During practice, his players wear Guardian caps.
2, you can still wear them all the time.
Shock absorbers around the helmet that claim to reduce impact by 33%.
And most importantly, it gives the parents a peace of mind. Thus far this season, knock on wood, we've had 0 concussions.
But do the caps work? The American Academy of Pediatrics just released an article saying there's no evidence that helmet add-ons reduce concussion risk. And the cap makers themselves say no helmet or practice apparatus is able to reduce or prevent concussions. Like with everything, more research is needed.
It hurts your head pretty bad.
Kyle Orr loves football, and he's had a concussion.
You have a constant headache for about a day or so.
Orr suffered his in 8th grade.
So I took 9th grade year off because my mom didn't want to risk me getting another bad one. But I just missed the game so much, I came back this year.
This is the biggest factor in the debate over whether parents should let their kids play football. all agree it's a sport with benefits beyond winning and losing.
It has so many great advantages for their health, their confidence, social, as well as physical being. We just need to understand the risks involved.
Those risks, for some, are too much. Last year, participation in youth tackle football fell 6%. The research being done on concussions may not bring tangible results for years.
There has certainly been a great increase in the awareness of what a concussion is and how to look for it. In terms of figuring out ways to prevent it, we still don't really have all the answers to that.
We want to provide as much information to parents as possible. You can find all of the research, studies, data, and other information mentioned in this story on our website, 11alive.com. Matt Pearl, 11 Alive News.
All right, very informative. Number 4, concussion symptoms. They generally show up soon after the injury. For some athletes, signs and symptoms of concussion can last for days, weeks, even longer than that. So joining me is our medical correspondent, Dr. Sujatha Reddy. What are the top 3 symptoms of a concussion?
Yeah, so for parents out there, the main 3 I would look for would be a headache. I would also look for any type of passing out or loss of consciousness, even if it's for a second. If your child blacks out, that's a very important sign. And then confusion or foggy thinking would be the next note on my list.
And I'm sure that a lot of young jocks want to get back out there on the field as quickly as possible. Yeah. So how long should they stay out and recover before they get out there again?
Yeah, and that's a really important point, because if you ask an athlete or a kid, they're going to say, I'm ready to play again.
I'm good, yeah.
So what we really need to look for are, measures. And so now there's actually structured tests that a healthcare provider can give a person who's had a concussion to see, are they back to normal? Are they back to their baseline? And then you can also put them through activities once they've recovered from their concussions. Their symptoms have gone away. How are they doing on a treadmill? How are they doing a Sudoku puzzle? Do their symptoms come back? So we now have ways that we can actually measure how these people are recovering from their concussion. So these are things a healthcare provider can do, and then you can decide when do you let your kid go back on the field.
Right, well, the first stop is at home. I mean, really, don't let your child talk you into letting them go back and play again.
Yeah, I think we've really learned that you really have to take this seriously, because we know that once you've had one brain bruise, a second concussion or a second brain bruise leads to more problems, and we're just seeing this happening. So especially in these youngsters, you really have to be cautious.
Yes, err on the side of precaution for sure. All right, Sujatha, thanks.
Take care.
Okay. Highs will be in the lower 80s.
All right, thank you, sir.
You got it.
At number 2, a lot of moms and dads are bending the rules, apparently, when it comes to buckling up their kids in the car. A new report out finds 1 in 4 parents drive without their kids wearing a seatbelt. Parents, get this, with higher incomes and higher education levels were most likely to allow their kids to be unbuckled. Parents say they didn't buckle up when they were in a rush or when they were rewarding their child. But and safety experts say, all kids should be buckled up at all times. All right, coming up, an update on the Navy Yard shooting today, including some new information that we've just learned about the alleged shooter's background when we come back.
I'm Julie Wolf. You're looking at it right here. Apple's 1-2 punch in the fight to win back smartphone dominance. Will it work? Well, right now you're weighing in on our poll at 11alive.com. But first, let me tell you what they're trying to sell you. The iPhone 5C. Some are saying the C is for cheap. Starts at $99 with a 2-year contract. It's plastic, comes in 5 colors, has a Retina display and an 8-megapixel camera.
I think the color will appeal to a younger demographic or a more design-conscious demographic.
I'm a little more excited about the iPhone 5S, called by Apple the most forward-looking device ever made. It includes a 64-bit processor, enough gaming power to put it on par with an Xbox 360. The camera has a larger aperture, bigger pixels, flesh tone flash, and anti-blur technology. And the most futuristic element, fingerprint recognition. It'll set you back at least $199.
Touch ID uses a key you have with you everywhere you go, your finger. And more specifically, your fingerprint, which is unique to each of us.
So did the new iPhone win you over? Our online poll shows the votes right now. 1 vote seemed to explain them all. You can get better phones with better features for cheaper prices. I have no interest in the Apple hype. If you do have interest, the phones go on sale September 20th. Julie Wolf, 11 Alive News.
All right, there you have it. Number 4, if you heard a loud boom and saw a bright light in the sky last night, it wasn't a spaceship or UFO. You were experiencing instead a meteor. NASA says that a baseball-sized comet entered Earth's atmosphere, traveling at 76,000 miles per hour. Though experts say just 3 seconds after hitting the Earth's atmosphere, it disintegrated, and that's what produced that flash of light and the loud boom.
And I'll tell you what, my Twitter feed went nuts. By the way, it is at Mike Francis WX, and this is from the AMS Meteor Board in the lower 60s. Brenda, looking really good this weekend.
How about that? Very nice, sir. All right, number 3, according to a new study out of the United Nations, the U.S. is among the happiest countries in the world. We ranked number 17 out of 156 nations on everything from life expectancy and overall satisfaction to economic conditions and freedom. The U.S. actually dropped 6 spots this year due to mediocre life expectancy and a perceived drop in freedom. Denmark and Norway, they had the highest levels of happiness, while African nations such as Rwanda scored the lowest. Number 2, NBC's new game show Million Second Quiz debuted in prime time last night, and you can still get in on all the action. It's a trivia marathon going on around the clock for 12 days straight. It takes place on a 60-foot outdoor set in New York City, where the players on the show also face competition from viewers playing online at home. That means you. By the way, the questioning never stops, all leading up to the grand finale next Thursday. So don't miss out on tonight's episode at 8 o'clock right here on NBC. All right, coming up, how many are honoring the September 11th victims this year on this, the 12th anniversary of the attacks?
Doug Richards, 11 Alive News.
All right, joining me now in a roundtable discussion about this are defense attorneys Jerry Froelich and Bill McKinney. Thanks for being here. And former prosecutors Peter Odom and Bob Wilson. Thank you both, all 4 of you rather, for joining us. All right, let's start with you. I'm going to start with you, Peter, for just some groundwork here. Sure. First, about rape. What constitutes rape in the state of Georgia?
To prove this case, the government, the state, has to show that this woman was subjected to intercourse without her consent and by force. That's the basic case that the state has to lay out.
About by force. The most controversial part of this investigation, though, is that the victim admits that she had been drinking. There is a lot of witnesses to what supposedly happened. This woman was not passed out, but she was conscious. How difficult will it be to prove that she was raped, that there was some force? I'm gonna pass this first to the defense attorney.
It's going to be very difficult, and I don't think they should have ever been arrested. I think this is a disgrace to arrest them based on this police report. And
both, I might add, all 4 of you have read the police report.
That's correct.
Read
Absolutely.
the witness testimony.
Yeah. That's correct. And this isn't like there was a very famous case just recently in Ohio, if you remember, where there were 3 high school football players.
Yes.
And the 14-year-old had passed out, and they stripped her and had sexual intercourse. This woman was standing up. People say that she consented to it, and that she was drinking. But just because you're drinking doesn't mean that you didn't consent. In fact, I think that also adds to her against her story.
Let me bring Bob in on this. Bob, you are a prosecutor, former prosecutor. All right, so would you take this case on? I mean, yes, she was drinking, but there are also witnesses who say she didn't even recognize her friends, that she was really acting strangely out of her head. Was she incapacitated enough to fall into the category of not being able to give consent?
I don't think you can tell yet. I think this type of case puts the prosecutor in a position where their moral and ethical duties rise to the surface. They're a quasi-judicial officer. They've got to review this case, and I would take and put my best investigators on it. I would go back through this entire case, re-interview every single witness, and I would put them under oath, and I would find out as best I could what the facts really are. Right now, this case is thin, and I'm not sure that it could go forward, and I'm not sure that it would be proper to indict it at this point. But you've got to give the victim a fair hearing. You've got to be sure, because if she's too intoxicated to give consent, then you've got a case.
Right.
If somebody puts something in her drink, you've got a case. But looking at all these facts, you've got to go back through them. Every single witness
Well,
has
let's
got
talk
to be
about the witness.
separated and interviewed
Let's talk
together.
about the witness, Bill McKinney here, defense attorney. So we have witnesses here. We've got their statements from the police report. A lot of their story does jibe, but all of these witnesses were also drinking. So what does that do to their credibility?
You talk about credibility. I think the most important thing, the most telling thing is when she got in a car, she told her friend to watch me tonight, I'm going to do something. And the credible witnesses are female students, fellow friends of her, who told her to stop and tried to pull her away from her actions and her conduct. These aren't males covering for males. This is another female and a friend who tried to stop her from her acts. They're victims in this case, but the victims are these young men. I think this was girls gone wild. I think she was possibly on drugs that night. So she said she might have smoked. She had something called Marley. And in this case, I think they're victims, but I think it's the young men who were there, not her.
Brenda, one thing I thought that was very important, and one of her girlfriends said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I know what I'm doing." And I think that's going to be a critical argument that's going to be made.
Before you throw her under the bus, or the young men under the bus, the DA has to take this case from scratch and redo it all over again and take a very close look. And that might mean going to the grand jury without seeking an indictment per se, but leaving it to the grand jury to look at every witness and tell you whether or not they want you to lay an indictment before.
But I'll tell you, the key is that you bring in every single witness you
Every
can.
single
Every
witness.
single. Don't just go with the ones that are most favorable to the young woman.
You're looking at the
you
whole
get
case.
everybody in.
But the most
you bring them all in.
But the most important thing is you shouldn't have arrested these kids because their names, now the girls' name's not out, but their names are out, their names are in the paper, they're going to be suspended, if not thrown
their
out
life
of school.
has changed
and their life, they're always
right,
they're
from
going to be
this point.
stuck with that.
Right.
And that's why I think it was absolutely
Well, you
Why
can
do you think charges?
You can go to the grand jury without having arrested them.
Why do you
That's
think
right.
charges were brought, though,
The police
in
were
this instance? When you say that it's so thin, the evidence is so thin.
Brenda, the police were faced with a victim without apparent motivation who had bruises and scratches on her body, and there were people that corroborate her account that she could not have given consent. The police had to move forward. Now, whether they'll ever get a conviction is a different story, but they had to move forward on these charges.
I think they could have been a little slower. I'm a former investigator, I'm a former peace officer, and I was a detective. Something like this should have never gone any further than getting further information. As Bob has said, try to get some information, try to conform, the evidence in some way. But to simply take this information, I think they rushed to judgment on this case.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I think they're going to have real problems in a courtroom if they get an indictment. And if they put everybody before a grand jury, they may not even get an indictment. And that's what should have been
somewhere
done.
You got to put brakes on it, and you've got to look at the thing from top to bottom, corner to corner, and weigh it all out. Because witnesses on paper are not always the same as when you see them.
And she does have a motive. I mean, all of a sudden now she's done some things, and she wakes up in the morning, and the girlfriend says, everybody knows, so you've got to have an excuse. She says that she only had a half a drink, and someone must have put the drink in the club. Yet her girlfriends say she was smoking some kind of, Marley, and she was drinking at the thing. So there's reasons, she has motives to cover.
I was standing here with 4 attorneys. Anybody, would you take this case on? Would you defend it? Would you prosecute it?
I defend it.
I would do what we're all suggesting before prosecuting it. I would find out what the blood evidence says, what the physical evidence says, and I would talk to every witness. And as suggested, put on the brakes.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I would do.
The unfortunate part of all of this is, though, as your point was made earlier, that these names are out here of all of these basketball players. Their lives, no matter what happens from this point forward, their lives are very different from now on.
You can't unring a bell.
Exactly.
Right.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insight on all of this.
Thank you.
All right, we are going. Joining me now is a panel of medical experts to talk more about this. First, our Dr. Sujatha Reddick, our medical correspondent, is here. But joining her is Dr. Heather Richardson, a breast cancer surgeon at Piedmont Hospital. Also, Selvi Palnappan. Did I say that correctly? Perfect. I hope I didn't mangle it. No, she is a certified genetic counselor at Northside Hospital. And finally, Dr. April Speed, a member of the board of the Komen Foundation and a breast cancer surgeon at DeKalb Medical Center. So thank you very much, ladies, for being a part of this conversation here. I would say, isn't it extreme to take this kind of measure, to have a double mastectomy, even when you don't have cancer? I mean, isn't that just over the top? Especially, there are other options out there. I'll direct the first question to you.
There are other options, but this was the best way for her to prevent going through what she saw her mother go through. And I have to say, I so admire her, and she went up a huge notch in my book for doing this, because it really is the best way for her to prevent breast cancer, and it was the right decision for her. So no, I don't think it was too extreme.
All right, so you don't think the options that are out there already on the table are worth considering when you test positive for something like that?
They're good options, but not as good as this.
Yeah, all right. So when you find out that you have tested positive for BRCA, Salvi, let me turn to you and just say, is the first order of business, the first step to get genetic testing if you know that you have the great possibility of getting cancer, you have it in your family, you suspect, genetic counseling even. Is that the first step?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm biased. I'm a genetic counselor, obviously. Yep. But, if you're considering genetic testing, a genetic evaluation by a genetic counselor is extremely important. We're talking about BRCA today, but there are lots of other genes that can also increase the risk for cancer. So as a genetic counselor, we're trained to look at hereditary factors in a family history and determine, is this family history hereditary? And what gene is causing the cancer in this family.
But can't you have sort of counseling in your OBGYN's office? Can you?
Yeah. And not everybody needs the test, and not everybody needs to go all the way to a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's extra money. That's an extra step, right? I have to make an appointment with a geneticist, I have to do the counseling, and then I have to make another appointment with another doctor. I mean, all of this costs money.
Right, and we have these kits in our office, and I'm sure you guys have them in your office. And so since we have the patient there, it's a simple blood test, and we can offer it. It is a good option to see a genetic counselor, but I think, in my opinion, you don't have to.
Yeah. Because it's not right for every woman, and I think that's the important thing that you mentioned. I'm so proud of Angelina Jolie for sharing her story, but it's not appropriate for every woman. Oftentimes, it may be cost prohibitive and also raise a lot of anxiety unnecessarily.
Well, let's talk about the cost.
And most people don't. Genetic testing is not an option for a lot of women.
Right.
So, which is why it's important to have the evaluation first to determine that.
Yeah, not everyone needs to have the test. For instance, if you just have a fairly ordinary background for breast cancer, then it's likely that it happened just accidentally, and less than 5 to 10% of all breast cancers are associated with this type of genetic mutation. So we don't want people to go stampeding towards their doctors just because they've had a relative with breast cancer.
So this is
most people don't need the test, and most people don't have the gene.
All right, so what's the cost for the test, and does insurance cover it?
Most insurance companies actually cover the testing. It's about a $4,000 test. So it is quite expensive, which is why it's important to test the most appropriate women. Oh. Now, one of the things that we do as a genetic counselor is discuss the options. I know you brought up that Angelina Jolie made such a huge decision.
Drastic.
Well, it's a very personal decision. I mean, I've had women who have decided to opt for screening instead of doing a prophylactic mastectomy.
Just to keep up with it and just do screening more often.
And so part of the discussion before testing is actually discussing the options. First of all, finding out whether you want to know. Are you ready to know that you're positive?
Yes.
And then second of all, how is it going to impact you and the rest of your family?
Well, I mean,
this is inherited.
I have to ask, how is it going to impact your pocketbook? I mean, so if you find out that you indeed are positive and you find out ahead of time, are you at risk of the insurance company dropping you?
Well, after
there's actually a federal law that was instituted in 2008-2009 that prevents insurance discrimination.
Right. But
so we do have protection.
In terms of the coverage, after August 2012, the Affordable Care Act does cover genetic testing if your doctor recommends it. So that's why it's so important that we have these discussions because a lot of women, it is cost prohibitive.
$4,000 sounds terrible, but with the Affordable Health Care Act and with insurance coverage now, it is very affordable. The average the company says is about $100, but I know for most women that I've done it on, it's a few hundred, so it is affordable. But to your point, no one should not have this test done because they're scared of being discriminated against, that their insurance is going to drop, then that should not happen.
And another really important factor is of course, once we've identified the genetic mutation, if you have a documented mutation in your family, well then testing for that mutation alone is much less expensive than the whole panel, only a little over $400. So if we know that it's in the family, healthy family members who think they want to be tested and want to have that power of information, it could be cheaper and they might not have to.
Is it really worth knowing? You talked about this or brought this up just a few minutes ago. Is it really worth knowing? I mean, what would you do with the information? Would it be like an axe hanging over your head all the time, or will a patient actually do something about about it.
A lot will do something about it.
These
Like
are
we're seeing
important
Angelina
discussions.
Jolie do it. Some
Yeah.
people will do something about it. For some people, like we're saying, it's not the right thing to do. It's not for
Or
everybody.
maybe not right then.
Yeah.
Not right then.
Yeah, because no two patients are alike. It's no longer one size fits all when it comes to breast care, and that's a great thing about it. But it's also that's what makes it more challenging. So you've got to have those discussions with your healthcare providers. And in terms of the cost, you can go to Komen.org. There are a lot of Komen affiliates throughout the state and the country that will offer genetic testing at low or no cost because they've committed to grants. I think about $34 million just in BRCA1, BRCA2 testing and devising better ways of treatment and devising of their patient-specific treatment plan. And that's the most important thing.
One really important point, though, that you mentioned is if you test negative, it doesn't mean you're not going to succumb to breast cancer or develop breast cancer, because only like less than 10% are associated with this gene.
That's a good
So
point.
a negative test does not mean don't get your mammogram.
you're not in the clear.
Right. It's so important, whatever you do, to stick to your screening, get your mammograms, do your breast exam, see a provider, and get a clinical breast exam. All that is so important.
All right, well, that's a great way to
your
end.
risk every
And
year.
this is just we've run out of time. That's a great way to end the conversation. I know you've got lots more information to share with us, but we are sadly out of time, ladies. I want to thank you
Thanks
very
for
much for
having
joining
us.
us. If you'd like more information on BRCA BRCA testing, the Help Desk actually has put together a resource page on our website, 11alive.com. There you can find all kinds of information on everything from whether the test is right for you, as these ladies have talked about, how it can help, and how to check if your insurance covers the cost. It's all under links in the news right there on our homepage. Again, ladies, thanks so much. All right, coming up, those pesky baggage and ticket change fees that we've all grown accustomed to, well, they're now being credited with actually saving the airline industry. Hear just how much we forked over last year alone.